Hello and welcome. I'm so grateful you've chosen to be here tonight. Before we begin our journey into the peaceful forest with Merlin, I want to ask something of you. If you find comfort in these stories, if they help you find the rest you're searching for, please consider subscribing to this channel. It's free, and it helps me continue creating these peaceful escapes for you night after night. Just click that subscribe button below and press the bell icon so you never miss a new story. And if tonight's tale brings you peace, a simple like would mean the world to me. Now, let's begin. Take a slow breath in and gently let it out. There is nothing you need to do now, nowhere you need to go. This moment belongs only to rest, only to you. Far from the noise and demands of the waking world, there exists a quiet forest, untouched by hurry or the weight of time. Ancient trees stand tall and patient, their strong branches swaying ever so softly in the cool night air. Leaves whisper to one another in a language without words, a rhythm meant only to soothe the tired mind, to calm the restless heart. Somewhere deep within this sacred forest, Merlin walks slowly along a moss-covered path. He does not hurry. He has lived long enough to know that hurrying serves no purpose here. His footsteps are feather-light against the earth, barely disturbing the soft moss and fallen leaves beneath his worn boots. With each careful step, the forest itself seems to breathe more deeply, as if it recognizes him, as if the very trees and stones know he has come not to command, but simply to listen. As you imagine yourself in this forest, allow your own breathing to slow naturally. Inhale gently through your nose and exhale through your mouth, a little longer than before. Feel the air move through you, carrying away any tension you've been holding. The air here is cool and impossibly clean, carrying the faint, earthy scent of pine needles and damp soil. A soft breeze moves lazily through the towering trees, brushing past rough bark and delicate leaves, creating a low, steady sound like a lullaby. The forest sings only for those who truly need it. This sound blends perfectly with the distant calls of night birds as they settle into their nests for rest. Merlin pauses at the edge of a small clearing where pale moonlight filters down through gaps in the canopy above. Silver-like pools on the forest floor, calm and still as water in a sacred well. He gently rests his ancient staff against the trunk of a broad oak tree and closes his eyes, listening with complete presence to the quiet language of the night. You are safe here, completely safe. Nothing will interrupt this moment. Nothing demands your attention. Nothing requires your worry. As the forest grows quieter still, your body can begin its journey into deep rest. Let your shoulders soften and drop away from your ears. Let your jaw loosen, releasing any tightness you didn't even know you were holding. Let your thoughts drift away like morning mist moving slowly between the trees there one moment, gone the next, and that is perfectly fine. The sounds of the forest continue their gentle rhythm, steady, reliable, unchanging. The whisper of wind through countless leaves. The distant rustle of small creatures finding their safe places for the night. The soft, eternal rhythm of nature, moving exactly as it should, exactly as it always has. Merlin remains nearby in the clearing, not speaking, not casting grand spells. His mere presence is enough. The forest responds to his deep calm, and that same calm slowly, gently reaches you as well, like ripples spreading across a still pond. With every breath out, feel yourself sinking deeper into comfort, deeper into the soft embrace of sleep. There is nothing to remember right now, nothing to plan or solve or fix. Only the quiet forest exists. The gentle night surrounds you, and ahead lies the slow, peaceful path that leads you softly into restful sleep. Rest now. You are exactly where you need to be. Our journey begins now. Night has arrived without urgency. Not suddenly, not loudly, but in the way gentle things always come slowly, patiently, as if the world itself has decided to rest. The sky above the forest deepens into soft shades of blue and charcoal, and the last traces of daylight fade behind distant hills. This is a time when nothing is expected of you. You may allow your breathing to slow now. Inhale softly and exhale, long and unhurried. Far from towns and roads, beyond the reach of clocks and worries, there lies a quiet forest. It is not a wild or dangerous place. It is old, calm, and deeply familiar to the night. The trees here have stood for centuries, their roots woven together beneath the soil, holding the land steady through time. The forest listens. A light breeze moves gently through the branches, setting leaves into a slow, soothing rhythm. Somewhere in the distance, a stream murmurs quietly as it makes its way over smooth stones, never rushing, never stopping. The air carries the faint scent of pine, moss, and damp earth, clean, cool, and comforting. Along a narrow path beneath the trees, Merlin walks. He moves without haste, his steps slow and quiet against the soft forest floor. His robe brushes lightly against ferns and tall grass, but nothing stirs in alarm. The forest knows him. It recognizes his presence not as a disturbance, but as a part of its natural rhythm. Merlin does not speak. Tonight, there is no need for words. He walks with his staff resting lightly in his hand, more as a companion than a tool. Its smooth wood is worn by time, shaped by patience rather than power. With each step, the forest seems to settle more deeply into itself, as though his calm presence encourages everything around him to rest. As you imagine this path, allow your own body to grow heavier. Let the ground beneath you feel steady and supportive. There is nothing you need to hold on to now. The path curves gently through the trees, illuminated by soft moonlight filtering down through the canopy above. Pale silver light falls in quiet patterns across the ground, shifting slowly as leaves sway. Shadows move lazily, never sharp, never startling. Merlin pauses beside an ancient oak. Its trunk is wide and strong, its bark deeply grooved by time. Moss clings to its roots, and small flowers grow undisturbed at its base. This tree has witnessed countless nights like this one. It has nothing left to prove. Merlin places his palm against the oak's bark and closes his eyes. The forest breathes. You may notice the rhythm now, the gentle rise and fall of sound, a subtle harmony of wind, leaves, and distant water. It is the same rhythm that carries you toward rest. Breathe in slowly and breathe out even more slowly. Nearby, a small clearing opens between the trees. The ground is soft with grass and fallen leaves, and the moonlight gathers here, cooling quietly like water. Merlin steps into the clearing and lowers himself onto a smooth stone, worn round by centuries of weather and time. He sits without tension, his shoulders relaxed, his expression peaceful. He has come here simply to be present, to listen, to allow the forest to remain as it is. You are welcome here, too. There is no danger in this place. Nothing demands your attention. Nothing pulls you forward or holds you back. The night grows deeper. Crickets begin their slow, steady song, each note blending seamlessly into the next. Somewhere farther away, an owl calls once, then falls silent again, satisfied that all is well. The breeze softens, barely stirring the leaves now, as though the forest itself is preparing for sleep. Merlin rests his staff against the stone beside him. He remains still. As you listen, allow your thoughts to drift like mist between the trees. If a thought arises, you do not need to follow it. Simply let it pass, gently, without judgment. Your body knows how to rest. The forest has always known. Time stretches here, losing its sharp edges. Minutes no longer matter. Only the steady presence of the night remains. Merlin's breathing is slow and even barely noticeable, yet perfectly in tune with the quiet world around him. The moon rises higher, its light becoming softer, more diffuse. Shadows blur. The clearing feels enclosed, protected, as though the forest itself has drawn closer, forming a gentle boundary around this moment. Merlin opens his eyes. They reflect the soft glow of moonlight, calm and thoughtful. He looks not at anything in particular, but at the forest as a whole, acknowledging its quiet companionship. There is no spell spoken, no gesture made. His presence alone is enough. You may feel yourself sinking deeper into stillness now. Let your shoulders relax completely. Let your jaw soften. Let your breath become effortless. The sounds of the forest continue, steady and reassuring. Nothing changes suddenly. Nothing needs to. The world has slowed to the pace of rest, and you are free to follow. Merlin remains seated as the night deepens further. Dew begins to settle on leaves and grass, catching faint traces of moonlight. The air cools slightly, crisp but gentle, wrapping the clearing in a quiet embrace. This forest will remain here through the night. It will guard your rest. There is no need to hurry. The forest is awake and watching, so you may sleep. The forest has grown quieter now. Not empty, not silent, but settled like a breath held gently, without strain. The moon has climbed higher into the sky, and its light spreads softly through the branches above, turning leaves and bark into shades of silver and gray. Nothing moves quickly here. Nothing needs to. Merlin rises slowly from the stone in the clearing. He does not disturb the night as he stands. The forest seems to shift just enough to make room for him, leaves brushing lightly against one another as if in greeting. He takes a step forward onto a narrow path that winds deeper between the trees. As you imagine this path, allow your own breathing to become slower and easier. There is no effort required. Your body already knows the way toward rest. The path is old, worn smooth by countless quiet footsteps. It curves gently, never sharply, never abruptly. On either side, tall trees stand close together, their branches forming a loose canopy overhead. Moonlight filters through in thin ribbons, drifting slowly across the ground as the leaves sway. Merlin walks without sound. His presence is calm and steady, like the slow turning of the night itself. With each step he takes, the forest seems to respond, branches settling, distant sounds softening, the air growing even more still. Somewhere far away, water moves quietly over stone. The sound is faint but constant, like a distant memory of motion. Closer by, leaves rustle softly as a gentle breeze passes through, then fades again. Pause here for a moment. Notice the rhythm of the forest. Notice the way sounds rise and fall, without urgency. Merlin continues along the path, his staff tapping lightly against the earth only once, and not again. He prefers to listen rather than speak. Tonight, the forest has all it needs to say. You may feel your thoughts beginning to slow. If a thought appears, let it drift past like a shadow between the trees. You do not need to follow it. You do not need to solve anything now. The moonlight grows brighter ahead, and the path opens into another clearing smaller than the last, more enclosed. Ferns line the edges, their fronds catching the light and holding it gently. The ground here is soft, covered in pine needles that cushion each step. Merlin pauses at the edge of the clearing. He stands very still. The forest responds by growing quieter still, as though listening for something that never needs to arrive. Even the breeze seems to hold its breath. You are safe in this place. Nothing will interrupt you. Merlin steps into the clearing and follows the curve of the path as it bends around a cluster of stones, smooth and pale in the moonlight. These stones have rested here for centuries, untouched, unhurried. They have no memory of noise or rush. Merlin rests his hand briefly against one of them as he passes, acknowledging its quiet presence. You may notice now that your body feels heavier, more relaxed. Let that feeling deepen. Let yourself sink into it. The forest floor slopes gently downward, and the path becomes even softer beneath Merlin's feet. Grass replaces pine needles. Small white flowers glow faintly in the moonlight, their petals closed for the night. Crickets sing steadily now, their rhythm slow and even. Each sound blends into the next, creating a soft, continuous layer beneath the quiet. Merlin's breathing is slow and calm. You may find your own breath matching his pace without effort. Inhale and exhale. The path leads toward a small stream, barely visible except where moonlight glints off its surface. The water moves quietly, never splashing, never breaking its gentle rhythm. Merlin stops beside it, watching as the current flows past smooth stones and fallen leaves. He lowers himself to the ground near the stream and sits, folding his robe neatly around him. The sound of the water becomes more noticeable now, a steady whisper that fills the space between thoughts. You do not need to listen closely. Simply allow the sound to be there. The forest has entered its deepest calm. Most creatures have settled into rest. Only the smallest movements remain: the occasional shift of leaves, the soft call of an owl far in the distance, the quiet flow of water continuing as it always has. Merlin closes his eyes. He does not sleep yet. He listens. The night feels complete now, whole and undisturbed. Time no longer moves forward in a straight line. It drifts, circles, softens. If your mind wanders, that is all right. Let it wander gently, without direction. Like the path through the forest, it does not need to lead anywhere. The moonlight shifts slightly as clouds pass slowly overhead, dimming and brightening the clearing in subtle waves. Nothing changes quickly. Nothing startles or demands attention. Merlin remains seated, perfectly at ease. The stream continues its quiet song. You may feel yourself sinking deeper into comfort now, as if the ground beneath you has grown warmer, more supportive. Your limbs feel heavy, relaxed, completely at rest. There is nothing left to do. The forest holds the night steady. As this part of the journey gently settles, Merlin stays by the stream, keeping watch in silence. The path behind him fades into shadow, and the path ahead waits patiently, ready for when the night deepens even further. For now, there is only stillness, soft sound, and rest. The forest is fully asleep now, not silent, but resting. The kind of rest that comes only after everything has settled into its proper place. Moonlight lies softly across the trees, no longer shifting, no longer changing. The clouds have thinned, and the sky feels wide and calm above the canopy. Stars remain distant and still, watching quietly without need or expectation. Merlin remains by the stream. He has not moved for a long while. The water flows past him in a slow, even rhythm, sliding around smooth stones, carrying small leaves gently downstream. The sound is constant, unbroken, and soothing, like a soft breath repeating itself again and again. Listen to the water. Let it guide you. The forest floor beneath Merlin feels cool and steady. The earth holds him without effort, just as it holds the roots of the trees and the stones along the stream. Nothing sinks too far. Nothing is unsettled. Everything is supported. A faint breeze moves through the upper branches, far above. It does not reach the ground. It simply stirs the leaves gently, producing a soft, distant whisper that rises and fades, and rises again. You do not need to follow the sound. You do not need to think about it. Let it pass through the night. Merlin's breathing is slow and even. Each breath comes naturally, without intention. His chest rises gently and falls, and rests briefly before the next breath begins. You may notice your own breathing matching this pace. Slow, unforced, comfortable. The forest accepts this rhythm without resistance. An owl calls once, far away. The sound is low and soft, not sharp, not startling. It echoes faintly, then disappears into the trees, leaving the night unchanged. Nothing follows it. Nothing interrupts the calm. Merlin lowers his head slightly, allowing his chin to rest comfortably. His eyes remain closed. He is not watching now. He is simply present, sharing the quiet with the forest. Time feels different here. Minutes do not pass in a line. They dissolve gently into one another, like mist thinning into air. If a thought appears in your mind, let it float briefly, then fade without effort. The stream continues. Water over stone, stone holding still, leaves drifting quietly. This sound does not change. It does not hurry. It does not stop. Somewhere nearby, a small animal shifts in its sleep beneath the undergrowth. The movement is barely noticeable. A soft rustle that settles almost immediately back into stillness. The forest breathes together. In and out. Moonlight touches the surface of the stream, creating faint, trembling reflections that move slowly with the current. They stretch and soften, never forming sharp shapes, never demanding attention. Merlin's staff rests beside him, untouched. There is no need for it tonight. The forest requires no guidance, no protection, no words. Everything is already as it should be. Your body may feel heavier now. Let that weight remain. Let it sink you deeper into rest. The ground beneath you, real or imagined, feels steady and reliable. It does not shift. It does not ask anything of you. It simply holds. The sounds of the forest grow more distant, not because they fade, but because your awareness softens. You no longer need to focus on each sound individually. They blend together. Water, leaves, breath, one continuous layer of calm. Merlin remains still. The night continues. There is no destination. There is nowhere to go. The path through the forest waits, but it does not call. It knows there will be time for movement later. For now, stillness is enough. Your eyelids may feel heavy. Let them rest. Let the darkness behind them feel safe and deep. The moon slowly lowers in the sky, though the change is too subtle to notice. Shadows shift by fractions, barely perceptible. The forest does not react. It has seen countless nights like this. It trusts the rhythm. Merlin's presence becomes almost indistinguishable from the surroundings. He is part of the forest, now another quiet shape beneath the trees, another steady breath in the night. You are not alone here. You are also not required to do anything. Sleep comes naturally in this place. It arrives gently, without announcement. The stream continues its soft murmur, repeating the same pattern again and again. Each repetition feels familiar. Each one reassures. Nothing unexpected will happen. Nothing needs your attention. Let yourself drift. If your thoughts begin to blur, allow them to. If images soften and fade, let them. The forest holds the night steady. Merlin remains by the stream as the hours pass unnoticed. He does not mark time. He does not count moments. He simply rests within them. The quiet deepens further, not into silence, but into something smoother, heavier, and more complete. A calm that fills every space. a calm that leaves nothing unsettled. Your breathing slows a little more. Your body relaxes fully. The forest sleeps. Merlin rests. The forest night deepens. Everything slows. Even the air feels heavier now, yet soft and comforting. The leaves above rustle faintly, whispering in a rhythm so slow, so steady, that it is almost a heartbeat of the land itself. Merlin sits quietly beneath the broad branches of an ancient oak. Its trunk is wide and gnarled, roots twisting like gentle waves across the forest floor. The canopy stretches far overhead, filtering moonlight into soft silver patches that rest on the moss and fallen leaves. He does not speak. He does not move. He is simply present. You too can let yourself become part of this quiet. Inhale slowly and exhale, letting go of any tension. The breeze moves lightly through the branches. It carries the scent of pine, damp soil, and the faintest hint of wildflowers. The air is cool, steady, and calm. A small stream nearby hums softly over smooth stones. Its sound blends with the faint rustle of leaves and the distant call of an owl. Everything here flows together, seamless and unhurried. Merlin leans his staff gently against the oak. His eyes close, he listens. No words are necessary. Only the quiet rhythm of the forest remains. Imagine the ground beneath you, soft and steady. Every part of your body begins to settle into it. Feet, legs, back, shoulders, arms. All relaxing, all letting go. The forest seems to breathe in sync with you. Inhale and exhale, steady, gentle, unforced. Somewhere far away, a deer moves quietly through the undergrowth. Its hooves make no sound. A fox curls in the brush, resting. A night bird turns in its nest, settling in for sleep. All of these tiny movements do not disturb the calm, they enhance it. Each sound is a layer of comfort, a reminder that the world is at peace. Merlin shifts slightly, only enough to feel the comfort of the earth beneath him. He listens to the night as it flows past him, uninterrupted. Each sound is soft, distant, blending with the hush of leaves and the murmur of water. Let yourself drift deeper with him. The wind moves again, brushing lightly against your imagined skin. Leaves shimmer under moonlight, swaying gently, casting patterns that shift slowly across the forest floor. Every movement is deliberate, unhurried, perfectly in tune with rest. The stream's gentle song continues, carrying small leaves and tiny twigs downstream. It flows past stones smooth from centuries of quiet motion. The sound is constant, rhythmic, and steady, a lullaby without words. Merlin leans back against the tree, letting the oak's support hold him fully. He does not close himself off from the forest. He becomes part of it. His presence is calm, steady, and warm, like a protective shadow in the moonlight. Your body may feel heavier now. Let that heaviness anchor you to this safe space. Let it settle, slow, untroubled. The forest watches over him. It watches over you. Every creature, every leaf, every stone seems to acknowledge the stillness. Nothing disrupts it. Nothing demands attention. Everything exists in perfect, gentle rhythm. The night deepens further. Moonlight grows softer. Shadows stretch, blending seamlessly with the darkness beneath the trees. Merlin's breathing matches the rhythm of the forest. Steady, slow, calm. Yours does too. Every inhale draws in peace. Every exhale releases tension. Every heartbeat slows, echoing the gentle flow of the stream. You may feel yourself drifting, further, deeper. Your mind lightens as thoughts fade like mist through the trees. Even time itself seems distant here. Minutes blur into moments, which blur into stillness. There is nowhere to go, nothing to do. Merlin remains seated, still and serene. The forest hums around him, each sound soft and comforting. The leaves whisper, the water flows, the wind brushes. All is quiet, all is safe, all is still. If your mind drifts, allow it. If your body sinks deeper, let it. If your thoughts dissolve, that is welcome. This is the space for sleep. This is the place for rest. The forest, Merlin, and you. All here together, breathing slowly, quietly, peacefully. Time flows without demand. The night carries you gently, seamlessly, toward dreams. And as part 4 fades into silence, the forest continues its steady rhythm, unbroken. The stream hums, leaves rustle softly, and the moonlight glimmers quietly across the trees. Nothing disturbs this night. Nothing awakens the world from its calm. Sleep arrives gently, naturally, carrying you into its quiet embrace. The night is at its quietest now. The forest holds its breath, not in tension, but in gentle stillness. Every leaf rests, every branch settles, every creature sleeps. Merlin remains beneath the old oak. He does not move. He does not speak. He is simply there, a calm, steady presence in the soft glow of moonlight. The stream flows past him, its water whispering over smooth stones. A soft, distant breeze moves through the canopy, brushing leaves with a delicate rhythm. Somewhere, far away, an owl shifts in its nest, then returns to sleep. All is as it should be. Breathe slowly, in and out. Feel the rhythm of the forest mirror your own. The night air carries the faint scent of pine, damp earth, and moss. It wraps around you like a gentle cloak. It carries away any remaining tension, any lingering thought, any last whisper of wakefulness. Merlin lifts his hand slightly, just a motion, a small acknowledgement of the world around him. The forest responds softly, a leaf brushing against another, a small ripple in the stream. Nothing abrupt, nothing startling, only calm, only continuity. The moonlight spreads in soft silver patches across the forest floor, painting every stone, every fern, every fallen leaf with its quiet glow. It does not demand attention. It only is. Your body may feel heavier now, anchored, safe. Your mind drifts slow and unhurried, like mist rising between the trees. Your breathing matches the rhythm of the stream, the trees, the night itself. In this moment, there is nothing else. No rush, no noise, no concern. Only the forest, Merlin, and your own gentle presence. A soft rustle passes through the leaves. A bird moves slightly in its sleep. The world whispers softly, inviting you deeper into rest. Merlin leans back against the oak, closing his eyes fully. He does not leave. He does not speak. He is the guardian of this quiet, guiding the night without effort. Let yourself settle fully. Let every thought, every tension, drift away. You are held. You are safe. You are calm. The stream hums its lullaby. The leaves sway gently. The night remains steady, continuous, unbroken. If sleep has not yet fully arrived, it is near. If it has, it deepens, carrying you further into the embrace of night. The forest watches over you. Merlin watches over the forest, and you are cradled between them, perfectly, softly, completely. Time loses meaning here. Moments stretch into peace. The gentle rhythm of nature, the steady presence of Merlin, and your own slow breathing combine into one seamless flow of calm. Allow yourself to drift now into dreams, into rest, into the quiet magic of the forest night. And so the forest continues, long after the last word is spoken, carrying you gently through the hours, until morning or until your mind awakens naturally, renewed, restored, and calm. Sleep here, softly, in the quiet forest, with Merlin by your side, and the night holding you in its gentle embrace. Merlin and the Sleeping Forest. In the days when magic still walked openly through the world, when the boundary between dream and waking was as thin as morning mist, there lived a wizard whose name was whispered with reverence throughout the land. Merlin, they called him, though he had borne many names across the countless years of his existence. His tower stood at the edge of the kingdom of Logres, built of gray stone that seemed to shift color with the changing light, sometimes silver as moonbeams, sometimes deep blue as twilight, sometimes the soft green of moss after rain. Tonight, as the sun descended beyond the western hills and painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, Merlin stood at his tower window, gazing out across the vast expanse of the elderwood forest. The ancient trees stretched as far as the eye could see, their canopy rolling like a great green sea, touched now with gold from the setting sun. But Merlin's keen eyes, which had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, noticed something amiss in the forest's usual evening chorus. The birds had fallen silent. It was not the comfortable silence of night's approach, when the day creatures settle into rest, and the nocturnal beings have not yet awakened. This was something else, a stillness so profound it seemed to press against the very air. The wind itself seemed reluctant to disturb the leaves, moving through the treetops with an unusual gentleness, creating the softest whisper of sound, like silk being drawn across stone. Merlin closed his eyes and extended his awareness outward, as he had learned to do centuries ago. His consciousness drifted like dandelion seeds on the breeze, floating beyond the tower walls, past the meadows where wildflowers nodded drowsily in the fading light, and into the depths of the elderwood. What he sensed there made him draw a sharp breath. Sleep, deep, profound, enchanted sleep was spreading through the forest like ripples on a pond. But this was no ordinary slumber. Merlin could feel the quality of it ancient, purposeful, neither malevolent nor entirely benign. It was magic of a kind he had not encountered in many long years, a spell woven with intention and care, as intricate as the finest tapestry. And at its heart, somewhere deep within the forest's green embrace, lay a presence both familiar and strange. The wizard descended from his tower study, his robes whispering against the stone steps. He moved with the unhurried grace of one who has learned that time is a river that flows around those who understand its currents. In his workshop, he gathered what he would need for the journey: a staff of ash wood, smooth from years of handling, a pouch of herbs and stones of power, and a cloak of midnight blue, woven with threads of starlight that his friend the Lady of the Lake had given him decades past. As he stepped out into the cooling evening air, the last rays of sunlight were fading from the sky. The first stars were beginning to appear, tiny points of light in the deepening blue vault above. Merlin paused for a moment, letting the peace of dusk settle around him. He could hear the distant murmur of the stream that wound its way down from the hills, its waters singing their eternal song over smooth stones. Somewhere far off, an owl called once, twice, then fell silent. The wizard set off toward the forest with measured steps, in no particular hurry. The path before him was one he had walked countless times, worn smooth by his feet and the feet of those who had come before him. On either side, the meadow grasses swayed gently, releasing the sweet scent of clover and wild thyme. Moths danced in the twilight, their wings catching the last gleams of day. As Merlin drew closer to the forest's edge, the change in the air became more pronounced. It was as if he were approaching the boundary between waking and dreaming, that liminal space where anything might be possible. The trees here were old beyond reckoning oak and ash, beech and elm, their trunks massive and gnarled, their roots diving deep into the earth to drink from waters that flowed in darkness. He passed beneath the first great boughs, and the quality of light changed immediately. The forest canopy filtered the dying daylight into shades of green and gold, creating a luminous twilight that seemed to exist outside of ordinary time. The air was cool and damp, rich with the scent of leaf mold and growing things, of bark and moss, and the secret life of the woods. And here, the enchantment was undeniable. A deer stood motionless beside the path, its head lowered as if in sleep, though its eyes were open and unseeing. Its sides rose and fell with the slow, deep rhythm of profound slumber. Nearby, a fox lay curled at the base of an oak tree, its russet fur barely visible among the ferns. Birds roosted on branches, with their heads tucked beneath their wings, swaying slightly in the gentle breeze, but otherwise perfectly still. Merlin knelt beside the sleeping deer, placing his hand gently on its flank. Beneath his palm, he could feel the slow, steady beat of its heart, the warm life force flowing through it. The creature was not harmed indeed. It seemed to be resting more peacefully than any natural sleep could provide. There was a smile on the wizard's weathered face as he straightened and continued deeper into the forest. The path wound between the ancient trees, rising and falling with the contours of the land. Merlin walked steadily onward, his staff tapping softly against the earth. All around him, the forest slept. Squirrels slumbered in their drays, rabbits dozed in their burrows. Even the insects seemed to have surrendered to the enchantment butterflies rested with closed wings on flower stems, and spiders sat motionless in their webs. Yet the forest was not silent, far from it. As Merlin's ears attuned to the subtle sounds around him, he began to hear the symphony of the sleeping wood. There was the whisper of wind through leaves, moving with a gentleness that seemed almost reverent. The creek he had heard from his tower was closer now, its waters murmuring and babbling over stones, the sound like soft conversation in a language older than words. Somewhere in the canopy above, branches creaked slightly as they swayed, wood speaking to wood in slow, patient tones. And beneath it all, almost too quiet to hear, was the sound of breathing. Thousands upon thousands of sleeping creatures, their breath rising and falling in a rhythm that seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of the earth itself. It was hypnotic, soothing, a lullaby sung by the forest to itself. Merlin found himself slowing his pace, not from weariness, but from a growing sense of reverence. This was no curse that had befallen the Elderwood. This was a gift, a blessing of rest granted to every living thing within its bounds. And the longer he walked through the dreaming forest, the more he began to understand its purpose. The world, he knew, was growing weary. The age of magic was waning, slowly but inevitably drawing toward its close. Humanity was awakening to new ways of thinking, new paths of power that had little to do with the old enchantments. The time would come, perhaps, not for many years yet, but it would come when forests like this would be rare, when the wild places would shrink and fade. But here, in this moment, the forest was being given a gift of perfect peace, a chance to rest deeply, to gather its strength, to dream whatever dreams ancient forests dream. And somewhere at the heart of this enchantment was the one who had woven it, waiting for him. Merlin smiled to himself and walked on into the deepening night, following the paths he knew by heart, guided by starlight that filtered down through the canopy, and by the gentle pulse of magic that drew him ever deeper into the sleeping wood. The night deepened around Merlin as he ventured further into the heart of the Elderwood. Above the canopy, the moon had risen a pale silver disk that floated serenely through wisps of cloud like a boat drifting on celestial waters. Its light filtered down through the leaves in scattered beams, painting the forest floor in patterns of silver and shadow that shifted gently with each breath of wind. The wizard's steps were soft upon the carpet of fallen leaves and pine needles that cushioned the earth. Centuries of autumn had laid down this blanket, layer upon layer, creating a pathway that yielded quietly beneath his feet. The scent of it rose around him rich, deep, the smell of time itself distilled into fragrance. Mixed with it was the perfume of night-blooming flowers that opened their petals only to the moon, and a clean, sharp scent of pine resin. As Merlin walked, he passed more sleepers. A family of badgers lay curled together in the entrance to their set, their black and white faces peaceful in repose. A stoat dozed on a fallen log, its body stretched out in complete abandonment to rest. Even the trees themselves seemed to slumber more deeply than usual, their leaves hanging still and quiet, their bark warm beneath his hand when he paused to steady himself on the uneven ground. The stream he had been following grew wider as he progressed, fed by countless small tributaries that trickled down from the higher ground. It sang as it went, a constant melody that wove through the silence, now murmuring over pebbles with a sound like distant conversation, now chuckling around larger stones with notes of quiet amusement, now falling in miniature cascades that added a gentle percussion to the forest's night song. Merlin knelt beside the water and cupped his hands, bringing the cool liquid to his lips. It tasted of stone and earth, of moss and moonlight, of all the secret places through which it had flowed on its journey from the hills. As he drank, he noticed that even the fish in the deeper pools had surrendered to the enchantment. They hung motionless in the current, their fins barely moving, their scales catching the moonlight like scattered coins of silver. Rising to his feet, the wizard continued his journey. The path began to climb now, rising steadily through groves of birch, whose white bark glowed luminous in the darkness. Their leaves, already turning with the approach of autumn, rustled with a sound like whispered secrets. Merlin's breath came a little harder with the ascent, reminding him that despite his magic, despite the long years he had lived, this body he wore was still subject to the laws of the world. But it was a pleasant exertion, the kind that brings the blood alive in one's veins and sharpens the senses. He was more aware than ever of the night around him, the coolness of the air against his face, the play of moonlight and shadow, the complex tapestry of sounds that filled the darkness. An owl called somewhere in the distance, its voice a soft questioning note that floated through the trees. Another answered from far away, and then silence returned, deeper than before. The path leveled out onto a ridge, and Merlin paused to catch his breath and survey what lay before him. The forest stretched away in all directions, an ocean of treetops touched with silver light. Here and there, wisps of mist were beginning to rise from the hollows and valleys, curling upward like the breath of the earth made visible. Stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance, so bright and clear that he could see the pale river of light that men call the Road of Spirits flowing across the vault of heaven. It was beautiful. After all his years, after all the wonders he had witnessed, the simple beauty of a forest at night could still move him. He stood for a long moment, simply breathing, simply being present to the gift of this moment, the cool air, the silver light, the profound peace that lay over everything like a benediction. Then, drawing his cloak more closely around his shoulders, against the night's growing chill, he pressed onward. The ridge gave way to a gentle descent into a valley where the trees grew even more ancient and enormous. Their trunks were so wide that 3 men linking hands could not have encircled them. Their branches reached out like great arms, creating a canopy so dense that almost no moonlight penetrated to the forest floor. Yet Merlin was not in darkness. The starlight woven into his cloak by the Lady of the Lake began to glow with a soft, steady radiance, just enough to light his way without disturbing the sleepers. Here, the magic was strongest. He could feel it thrumming through the air, like the vibration of a great bell struck long ago, its note still reverberating through the world. It made the hair on his arms stand up, made his skin tingle with awareness. This was old magic, primal magic, the kind that had existed before human wizards learned to shape and channel it, when the earth itself was young and everything was possible. A circle of standing stones emerged from the shadows ahead, weathered monoliths that had stood in this place since time beyond memory. They were covered in moss and lichen, their surfaces carved with spirals and patterns that seemed to shift in the uncertain light. Merlin approached them with reverence, placing his hand on the nearest stone. It was warm beneath his palm, thrumming with contained power. He stepped into the circle. Immediately, the quality of the air changed. It was as if he had passed through an invisible curtain into a space set apart from ordinary reality. The sounds of the forest became somehow both closer and more distant, more vivid, yet also dreamlike. The moonlight, which had been blocked by the canopy, now filled the circle with radiance, though when Merlin looked up, he could see no break in the leaves above. It was light that came from elsewhere, from the borderlands between this world and the realm of dream. In the center of the stone circle grew a tree unlike any other in the forest. It was an oak, but an oak of such age and majesty that calling it merely a tree seemed insufficient. Its trunk was massive, its bark deeply furrowed with the passage of countless years. Its branches spread wide, creating a canopy within the canopy, and from those branches hung leaves of silver and gold that chimed softly when the breeze touched them, making music that was almost too beautiful to bear. And at the base of that tree, sitting with her back against the trunk and her legs crossed before her, was the one Merlin had come to find. She was young and old at the same time, as all of her kind were. Her hair was the color of autumn leaves, copper and gold and deep russet brown, and it fell unbound to her waist. Her dress seemed woven from mist and moonlight, from the petals of flowers and the silk of spider webs. Her eyes, when she opened them at his approach, were green as the forest in spring, and they held depths that could drown an unwary soul. "Hello, Merlin," she said, and her voice was like the wind in the leaves, like water over stones, like all the sounds of the forest given speech. "I wondered how long it would take you to come." The wizard bowed, not from subservience, but from respect. "Lady," he said softly, "what have you done to your forest?" She smiled, and it was like sunrise after a long night. "I have given it rest," she said simply. "Is that not what all weary things deserve?" Merlin moved closer and lowered himself to sit across from her, his old joints creaking slightly as he arranged himself on the soft grass. The standing stones rose around them like silent witnesses, and the silver-gold leaves chimed their quiet song overhead. "Tell me," he said gently, settling his staff across his knees. "Tell me why." The Lady of the Forest, for that was who she was, the guardian spirit of the Elderwood, old when the first human footsteps echoed through these glades, looked at him with eyes that held both sorrow and serenity. "Because the world is changing," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Because the age we have known is passing, and a new one is being born. Because my children, the trees, the creatures, all the wild things of this place, they are tired, Merlin. So very tired." She reached out and placed her hand on the earth beside her, and where her palm touched the ground, small flowers bloomed white as stars. "They have given so much. They have sheltered and fed humanity since the first people came to these lands. They have weathered storms and droughts, fires and floods. They have held the soil with their roots, cleaned the air with their leaves, provided homes for thousands upon thousands of living things." The wizard nodded slowly, understanding beginning to dawn. "And so you have given them this gift. A chance to dream," the lady said, and now there were tears on her cheeks, though she was smiling. "A chance to sink into deep rest and remember what they are, to gather their strength for what is to come. Because it will not be easy, Merlin. The future will not be kind to wild places like this." Merlin sat in silence for a long moment, absorbing the weight of the lady's words. Around them, the stone circle seemed to pulse gently with ancient power, and the silver-gold leaves of the great oak continued their soft chiming, a sound like distant bells carried on an evening breeze. The moonlight that filled the sacred space grew brighter, as if the moon herself were leaning closer to hear their conversation. "How long will they sleep?" Merlin asked at last, his voice quiet and contemplative. The lady tilted her head, considering. A strand of her copper hair drifted across her face, and she brushed it back with fingers that seemed almost translucent in the moonlight. "Time moves differently in enchanted sleep," she said. "For them, it might feel like a single night's rest, deep and dreamless and restorative. But in the waking world—" She paused, gazing up at the canopy above. 3 days and 3 nights. Long enough for every creature, every tree, every blade of grass to sink into the depths of rest and emerge renewed. "And you?" Merlin leaned forward slightly, studying her face. "How long have you been here, maintaining this spell?" A small smile touched her lips. "I began as the sun set yesterday. I will remain until the enchantment is complete." She gestured to the space around her, and Merlin noticed for the first time the faint lines of exhaustion around her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands. "It takes concentration, you understand. The spell must be held steady, like a lullaby sung without pause. If I falter, if my attention wavers, they will begin to wake, and the gift will be incomplete." The wizard's expression softened with concern. "You are weary." "I am," she admitted, and there was no shame in her voice, only acceptance. "But it is a good weariness, the kind that comes from purposeful work. Like a mother who has stayed awake through the night tending a sick child, or a farmer who has labored from dawn to dusk to bring in the harvest." Merlin rose slowly to his feet and walked to the edge of the stone circle, looking out into the sleeping forest. The mist was thicker now, rising from the earth in soft veils that drifted between the trees like wandering spirits. It caught the moonlight, and glowed with a pale, ethereal radiance. Through it, he could see the dark shapes of trees, the occasional gleam of water where the stream wound its way through the valley below. "I have lived a long time," he said, speaking as much to himself as to the lady. "I have seen empires rise and crumble like sandcastles before the tide. I have watched humans discover fire, forge metal, build cities of stone. I have witnessed the best of what they can be and the worst." He turned back to face her. "And I have watched the wild places shrink year by year, season by season." The lady nodded, and more tears slipped down her cheeks, silver as starlight. "Yes, it is the way of things. Humanity grows and expands, and that which is wild must retreat. I do not begrudge them this. It is their nature to build and shape and change the world around them, just as it is the nature of the oak to grow tall and the nature of the river to flow to the sea. But it grieves you nonetheless." "It does," she whispered. "Oh, it does. Every tree that falls, every meadow that becomes a field, every stream that is dammed or diverted. I feel it like a small wound, not painful enough to destroy me, but constant, persistent, accumulating over time." She looked down at her hands, turning them over as if seeing them for the first time. "Sometimes I wonder how much longer I will endure. We spirits are tied to the places we guard. When the last tree of the elderwood falls, I will fade with it." Merlin returned to sit beside her, moving with the careful deliberation of age. He was silent for a time, listening to the night sounds, the whisper of wind, the murmur of water, the gentle breathing of 10,000 sleeping things. An idea was forming in his mind, delicate as a soap bubble, fragile as new ice on a winter pond. "What if," he said slowly, "you did not have to maintain the spell alone?" The lady looked at him, curiosity kindling in her green eyes. "What do you mean?" The wizard gestured to the space around them with his staff. "You are holding this enchantment through the force of your will and the depth of your magic. It drains you because you bear the entire weight of it upon your shoulders." He met her gaze steadily. "But I am here now. And while my magic is different from yours, learned rather than innate, shaped by study rather than born from the earth itself, it is not insignificant." Understanding dawned across her face, followed quickly by hesitation. "Merlin, I cannot ask this of you. To share this burden would mean staying here with you for the next 2 days and nights," he finished. "Sitting in this circle, helping to maintain the spell, allowing you to rest when you need to." He smiled, and there was warmth in it and kindness. "I am old, lady. I have lived more years than most humans dream of. I have advised kings and battled demons, crafted spells and broken curses. But when was the last time I simply sat still and let the world be?" The lady stared at him, her expression a mixture of gratitude and wonder. "You would do this? Give up 3 days of your time to help my forest sleep?" "Time," Merlin said softly, "is the one thing I have in abundance, and I can think of no better way to spend it than here, in this sacred place, helping to ensure that beauty and wildness survive a little longer in this changing world. Fresh tears spilled from the lady's eyes, but now they were tears of relief and joy. She reached out and took his weathered hand in both of hers. Her touch was cool and warm at the same time, like spring water and summer sunlight combined. "Thank you," she breathed. "Thank you, old friend." Merlin squeezed her hand gently and then released it, settling himself more comfortably against one of the standing stones. "Now then," he said with quiet authority, "tell me how this enchantment is constructed. Show me the pattern of it, the weave and weft of the spell. Let me learn it so that I may help you hold it steady." The lady composed herself, brushing away her tears with the back of her hand. Then she closed her eyes and began to speak, her voice taking on a rhythmic, almost musical quality. "The spell is woven like a web," she said, "with threads that connect every living thing in the forest. Can you feel them, Merlin? Close your eyes and extend your awareness. Feel how each creature, each tree, each blade of grass is touched by a strand of magic, gentle as a mother's hand on a sleeping child's brow." Merlin did as she instructed, letting his eyes drift closed. He breathed slowly, deeply, centering himself as he had learned to do long ago in the early days of his training. He released the constant chatter of thought and simply allowed himself to be present, aware, receptive. And gradually, like stars emerging as twilight deepens into night, he began to perceive it, the vast, intricate network of the enchantment. It spread out from the lady like the roots of an enormous tree, diving deep into the earth and rising high into the canopy, touching everything, connecting everything. Each thread pulsed with gentle power, carrying the essence of deep sleep to whatever it touched. "I see it," he murmured, awe coloring his voice. "Or rather, I feel it. It's beautiful. So delicate, yet so strong." "Yes," the lady said, and he could hear the smile in her voice, even with his eyes closed. "Now, reach out with your own magic. Let it flow from you like water from a spring. Don't try to control or direct it. Simply let it come, and I will show you how to join it with mine." Merlin did so, drawing on the deep well of power that resided within him. It was different from the lady's magic, for hers was green and growing, born of earth and leaf and flowing water. His was silver and starlit, shaped by study and will and the accumulated wisdom of centuries. But magic, at its core, was magic. Different expressions of the same fundamental force that animated the universe. He felt the lady's presence beside him, not physical but spiritual, her consciousness touching his gently, guiding. "There," she whispered, "let your magic flow into mine. See how they can blend and strengthen each other, like two streams joining to form a river. It happens slowly, carefully, like learning a new dance with an old friend." Merlin's silver magic began to weave itself into the lady's green enchantment, threading through the pattern, reinforcing it, taking on some of the weight. The moment it did, he heard the lady release a long, shuddering breath of relief. "Oh," she said softly. "Oh, that is better. I did not realize how heavy it had become until some of that weight was lifted." Merlin opened his eyes and found her looking at him with profound gratitude. The lines of exhaustion around her eyes had eased slightly, and some color had returned to her cheeks. "Rest now," he told her gently. "I will hold the spell for a while. You need not sleep. I know you dare not release your connection to the enchantment entirely, but you can let yourself relax. Close your eyes. Listen to the forest breathe." The lady of the forest did as Merlin suggested, settling herself more comfortably against the trunk of the great oak. She let her eyes drift closed, and though she remained connected to the enchantment, Merlin could feel her presence there. Woven through every thread of magic, she allowed herself to sink into a state of deep rest, trusting him to maintain the spell's integrity. Merlin sat with his staff across his knees, his awareness spread wide through the sleeping forest. It was a strange and wondrous sensation to be connected to so many living things at once. He could feel the slow, steady heartbeat of the ancient oaks, the quick flutter of a sleeping bird's pulse, the cold-blooded stillness of a snake coiled beneath a stone. Each creature dreamed its own dreams, wordless, image-rich visions of sun-warmed stones and successful hunts, of acorns sprouting and seasons turning. The night deepened around them. The moon traced its arc across the sky, painting the forest in ever-shifting patterns of light and shadow. Wisps of mist continued to rise from the valleys and hollows, creating layers of soft whiteness that caught the moonlight and transformed it into something ethereal, something that belonged more to the realm of dream than to waking reality. Time passed strangely in the stone circle. Minutes felt like hours, and hours felt like minutes. Merlin found himself drifting into a meditative state, not quite awake and not quite asleep, but suspended in that liminal space between. In this state, his consciousness expanded even further, and he began to perceive things he had not noticed before. He felt the slow, patient awareness of the standing stones themselves, ancient witnesses that had stood in this place for thousands of years, watching seasons turn and empires crumble. They remembered a time before humans walked these lands, when the world was younger and wilder, when magic flowed as freely as water, and the boundary between the material and spiritual realms was gossamer thin. He felt the great oak at the center of the circle, its roots diving deep into the earth to tap well springs of power that lay hidden far below. This tree was older than the lady herself, perhaps. It had been here when the stones were raised, had sheltered the first humans who came to worship in this sacred place, had witnessed ceremonies and celebrations, births and deaths, the endless cycle of life that unfolded beneath its branches. And he felt the earth itself, the deep, slow consciousness of the land, patient and eternal. The earth that had supported countless generations of life, that had weathered ice ages and periods of warmth, that had been shaped by wind and water and the slow grinding of geological time. The earth that would remain long after humans and their works have faded into memory. A sense of peace settled over Merlin, deep and abiding. In this moment, holding this enchantment, connected to every living thing in the forest, he felt more complete than he had in years. The constant restlessness that usually drove him the need to act, to influence, to shape events fell away, leaving only a profound sense of presence and belonging. The stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance. Constellations he had known since childhood traced their paths across the heavens. The Great Bear, the dragon, the swan spreading its wings across the river of light. He had used these stars for navigation on countless journeys, had taught young Arthur to read the night sky, had watched them from tower windows and mountain peaks and lonely roads. But tonight, seeing them through the canopy of the sleeping forest, they seemed more beautiful than ever. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the stone circle, an owl called. Its voice was soft and questioning, a gentle hoot that echoed through the trees. Another owl answered from a different direction, and then a third, creating a brief conversation in the language of the night. And silence returned, deeper and richer than before, filled with the breathing of sleepers and the whisper of wind through leaves. Merlin glanced at the lady. She remained resting against the oak, her breathing slow and even, her face peaceful in repose. The copper and gold of her hair seemed to glow with its own soft light, and there was a faint smile on her lips, as if she were experiencing pleasant dreams. The wizard turned his attention back to the spell, checking each thread, ensuring that all remained stable and strong. It was like tending a vast garden, noticing where the magic needed a gentle reinforcement here, a subtle adjustment there. A young deer at the forest's edge had nearly stirred from sleep, disturbed by some instinct or half-formed dream, and Merlin carefully strengthened the enchantment around it, sending soothing waves of calm until it settled once more into deep rest. As he worked, Merlin found himself thinking about the nature of rest itself. In his long life, he had rarely allowed himself true rest. There was always another task to complete, another problem to solve, another person to help. Sleep was a necessity he submitted to rather than a gift he embraced. But holding this spell, ensuring the forest's deep slumber, he began to understand what the lady had been trying to give her charges. Rest was not merely the absence of activity. It was a state of being, a surrender to the natural rhythms that governed all living things. It was a chance for the body to heal, for the mind to process and integrate, for the spirit to reconnect with deeper sources of wisdom and strength. In sleep, creatures did not simply stop, they transformed. They renewed, they prepared themselves for the next cycle of waking. The moon reached its zenith and began its slow descent toward the western horizon. The quality of the darkness began to change, becoming somehow deeper, yet also lighter, as if the night were gathering itself for the transition to dawn. The mist in the valleys thickened, creating pools of white that looked solid enough to walk upon. A gentle breeze stirred through the stone circle, carrying with it the scent of night-blooming flowers and cool earth. The silver-gold leaves of the great oak chimed more loudly for a moment, their music rising and then falling back to a gentle whisper. The lady stirred slightly in her rest, murmuring something too soft for Merlin to hear, and then grew still once more. Merlin felt a subtle shift in the enchantment, not a weakening, but a deepening. The forest was sinking into an even more profound level of sleep, where healing and renewal could occur at the deepest levels. He adjusted his magic to match this change, letting it flow more strongly, supporting the spell as it evolved and strengthened. Time continued its strange dance. The stars began to fade as the first hint of dawn approached, though true sunrise was still hours away. This was the darkest hour of the night, the time when the veil between worlds grew thinnest, when spirits walked more freely and magic ran strong. Merlin felt it in the air, in the thrumming of the standing stones, in the pulse of power that flowed through the earth beneath him. And in that dark hour, sitting in the stone circle with the sleeping forest all around him, and the lady resting nearby, Merlin experienced something he had not felt in many long years. Perfect contentment. Not happiness, which came and went like weather. Not satisfaction, which was always tied to accomplishment. But contentment, a deep, abiding sense that in this moment, in this place, everything was exactly as it should be. There was nowhere else he needed to be, nothing else he needed to do, no other person he needed to become. He was simply here, present, alive, connected to the web of existence in a way that transcended the usual boundaries of self. A single tear rolled down his weathered cheek, though he was not sad. It was a tear of gratitude, of wonder, of recognition. The lady had given him a gift as well, he realized. In asking for his help, in allowing him to share in this sacred work, she had given him the chance to rest as well, not physically, but in a deeper way. A chance to let go of the constant burden of responsibility and simply be part of something larger than himself. The darkness began to give way to the first gray light of pre-dawn. The eastern horizon, visible through gaps in the canopy, started to show the faintest blush of color, not yet pink or gold, but a subtle lightening of the darkness, like ink being gradually diluted with water. Birds that were not part of the elderwood began to sing in the distance, their voices carrying across the sleeping forest from the lands beyond. Merlin glanced at the lady and saw that her eyes were open, watching him with an expression of gentle understanding. "You felt it, didn't you?" she said softly. "The gift of rest." He nodded, not trusting his voice for a moment. When he spoke, his words were barely more than a whisper. "Thank you." She smiled and reached out to touch his hand briefly. "No, Merlin. Thank you for understanding, for helping, for being here." Together, they turned their attention back to the spell, weaving their magic into an even stronger pattern as the first day of the forest's enchanted sleep drew toward its end and the second day began. Dawn broke over the elderwood like a gentle awakening, though the forest itself remained deep in its enchanted slumber. The sun rose slowly, painting the eastern sky in shades of rose and amber, soft lavender and pale gold. Its light filtered through the canopy in slanting beams that seemed almost solid, illuminating motes of pollen and particles of mist that drifted lazily through the air like tiny stars fallen to earth. Merlin and the lady maintained their vigil in the stone circle, their magic flowing together in harmonious pattern. Through the long hours of the second day, they took turns bearing more of the spell's weight, allowing each other brief periods of deeper rest. They spoke little, for words seemed unnecessary in this place, where thought and feeling flowed more freely than speech. When they did speak, it was of small things and large memories of the ancient past. Observations about the changing world, quiet reflections on the nature of magic and life, and the intricate web that connected all beings. The lady told Merlin of the first humans she had encountered thousands of years ago, when they were still nomadic hunters following game through the endless forests. She spoke of how they had revered the wild places, leaving offerings of gratitude, taking only what they needed, living in balance with the land. Merlin, in turn, shared stories of his own long life of Arthur and the brief, shining moment when it seemed possible that humanity might build something truly noble, of the Lady of the Lake and the deep magic of the waters, of dragons and fair folk, and all the wonders he had witnessed. But he also spoke of loneliness, of the strange isolation that came from outliving everyone he had ever loved, of watching the world change in ways he could not always understand or approve. Sometimes, he confessed, as the sun climbed toward noon on that second day, I wonder if I have lingered too long. The age of magic is ending. Perhaps I should fade with it, as you will fade when the last tree of the elderwood falls. The lady looked at him thoughtfully, her green eyes reflecting the dappled sunlight. But the age of magic is not truly ending, is it? It is only changing, transforming into something different. Magic does not die, it merely takes new forms. Merlin considered this, watching as a shaft of sunlight illuminated the silver gold leaves of the great oak, making them shine like beaten metal. What do you mean? Look at humanity, the lady said, gesturing broadly as if to encompass the whole world beyond the forest. They are learning to work metal in ways our ancestors never dreamed. They are building structures that defy the limitations of wood and stone. They are beginning to understand the hidden laws that govern the natural world, the movements of stars, the properties of substances, the principles of force and motion. She paused, a small smile playing at her lips. Is that not magic of a different kind? They are learning to transform reality through knowledge and craft, just as we transform it through will and ancient power. The wizard was silent for a long moment, turning her words over in his mind. Around them, the forest breathed its slow, sleeping breath, and the standing stones hummed with contained energy. A butterfly, not quite under the spell's influence, drifted through the circle on wings of orange and black, a small splash of movement in the stillness. Perhaps you are right, Merlin said at last. Perhaps what I mourn is not the ending of magic itself, but the ending of my understanding of how magic works. The new age will have its own wizards. They will simply call themselves by different names. Scholars, scientists, engineers, and they will work wonders I cannot imagine. But that does not mean there is no place for the old magic, the lady added softly, for the magic of wonder and mystery, of connection to the living earth, of reverence for what cannot be measured or explained. That magic will endure as long as there are wild places, as long as people still feel awe when they stand beneath ancient trees or gaze up at the stars. As the second day progressed, Merlin noticed subtle changes in the spell. The magic was reaching its deepest point now, working at levels beyond the physical. The trees were not merely sleeping, they were communing with their roots, with the mycorrhizal networks that connected them beneath the soil, with the deep memory of the forest itself. The animals dreamed not only of their individual lives, but of the collective patterns that had guided their species for countless generations. And something more was happening, something the lady had not mentioned, but which Merlin could now perceive. The forest was releasing what it no longer needed: old pains, accumulated stresses, the weight of seasons of drought and disease and hardship. Like a body in deep sleep, purging toxins and repairing damage, the elderwood was healing itself, letting go of burdens it had carried for too long. The afternoon of the second day faded into evening, and evening into night once more. This second night was different from the first. Merlin and the lady had found their rhythm now, their magic flowing together as naturally as two streams joining into one river. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one, listening to the eternal song of the sleeping forest. The moon rose again, a day older, slightly less full, but no less beautiful. Its light painted the mist that rose from the valleys in shades of silver and pearl. An owl passed overhead on silent wings, its shadow briefly crossing the face of the moon. Somewhere far off, a wolf howled a long, lonely sound that spoke of wild spaces and untamed things. The sound made Merlin's heart ache with a strange mixture of sorrow and joy. "I will miss this world," the lady said suddenly, breaking the long silence. "When my time comes to fade, I will miss the sound of rain on leaves, the smell of earth in spring, the feel of sunlight on bark. I will miss the creatures who make their homes in my forest, the changing seasons, even the cold of winter and the trials of drought." She looked at Merlin, and there was acceptance in her eyes rather than fear. "But I will not regret having lived. Every moment has been a gift." Merlin reached over and took her hand, holding it gently. "The world will be poorer without you." "Perhaps," she said with a small smile. "But perhaps new spirits will arise, guardians suited to whatever the world becomes. The earth is resilient, Merlin. Life finds a way to endure, to adapt, to continue. It has survived ice ages and floods, asteroid impacts, and volcanic eruptions. It will survive the age of humanity as well, though it may be transformed in the process." They sat hand in hand as the night deepened, two ancient beings sharing a moment of profound connection. And Merlin realized that this, too, was part of the gift, not just helping the forest sleep, but this opportunity to sit with another who understood the weight of years, the burden and blessing of witnessing ages pass. The third and final day dawned with unusual brilliance. The sky was perfectly clear, unmarred by even the smallest cloud. The sun rose like a crown of gold, flooding the forest with warm, honeyed light. Birds beyond the elderwood's boundaries sang with particular enthusiasm, as if celebrating something they could not name, but instinctively felt. "Today," the lady said as morning advanced toward noon, "the spell will begin to release. Slowly, gently, the forest will start to wake. It will take hours. They will rise from sleep as gradually as the tide comes in, barely perceptible at first, and with increasing momentum." Merlin could already feel it beginning. The enchantment was loosening, not breaking, but unraveling in a carefully controlled way, thread by delicate thread. The magic that he and the lady had woven together was now being rewoven into a different pattern, not a lullaby to maintain sleep, but a gentle moaning song to encourage awakening. As midday approached, the first stirrings began. A squirrel in a distant oak twitched its tail. A rabbit in its burrow opened one eye, then closed it again, not quite ready to rise. A tree's leaves rustled with something more than wind, as if the tree itself were stretching after a long rest. The lady stood, and Merlin rose with her, both feeling the enchantment reaching its conclusion. They walked to the edge of the stone circle and looked out over the forest. The mist had burned away in the strong sunlight, and they could see for miles across the canopy of the elderwood, a sea of green touched with the first hints of autumn-color gold and bronze, crimson and amber. "Look," the lady whispered, pointing. At the forest's edge, where the first trees met the meadowlands beyond, a deer was rising to its feet. It stood on trembling legs for a moment, shaking its head as if to clear away the remnants of extraordinary dreams. Then it began to walk, moving slowly at first, and with increasing confidence, heading toward the stream to drink. A bird in a nearby tree opened its eyes. It ruffled its feathers, tested its wings, and then launched itself into the air with a clear, piercing song of joy. Another bird answered, and another, until the forest began to fill with music. Throughout the elderwood, creatures were waking. Foxes emerged from their dens, blinking in the bright sunlight. Badgers stretched and yawned. Butterflies opened their wings and took flight. Fish in the streams began to move again, fighting against the current with renewed vigor. And the trees, oh, the trees, their leaves began to dance in the breeze with what could only be described as happiness, a rustling celebration of life renewed. Merlin felt tears streaming down his face, though he made no effort to stop them. The beauty of it was almost unbearable, thousands of lives returning to wakefulness at once, each refreshed and restored, each ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The forest itself seemed brighter somehow, more vital, as if 3 days of deep rest had replenished some fundamental essence that had been slowly depleting over years. The lady was weeping too, but she was smiling through her tears. "They are ready now," she said softly, "ready for whatever comes. They have remembered who they are, what they are. They have touched the deep roots of existence and drawn strength from them." As the afternoon advanced, the awakening spread throughout the entire forest. The spell had completely dissolved now, leaving no trace except in the renewed vitality of every living thing it had touched. Merlin and the lady stood together in the stone circle, watching as their magic faded like morning mist under the growing sun. "I should go," Merlin said at last, though he was reluctant to leave. "My tower will be buried in correspondence by now, and there are always those who seek my counsel." The lady turned to him and took both his hands in hers. "Thank you, Merlin, for your help, for your company, for understanding what I was trying to do here." "Thank you," he replied, "for reminding me that rest is not weakness, that stillness can be as powerful as action, that sometimes the greatest magic is simply allowing things to be as they need to be." They embraced, two ancient beings, sharing a moment of affection and respect. Then Merlin retrieved his staff, adjusted his starlight cloak, and prepared to depart. But before he left the circle, he turned back one more time. The world is changing, lady, but as long as there are guardians like you who love and protect the wild places, as long as there are those who remember the old magic and honor the ancient ways, perhaps there is hope yet. Perhaps some balance can be found between the new age and the old. The lady smiled, radiant as sunrise. Perhaps, she agreed, and perhaps that is enough. Merlin walked back through the waking forest, his heart lighter than it had been in years. All around him, life celebrated its return to full awareness. A family of deer bounded across his path. Birds wheeled overhead in joyous spirals. Even the trees seemed to lean toward him as he passed, as if in thanks or blessing. By the time he emerged from the elderwood into the meadowlands beyond, the sun was beginning its descent toward evening. He paused at the forest's edge and looked back one final time. The ancient trees stood tall and proud, their leaves gleaming in the golden light. Somewhere deep within, he knew the lady was settling back into her grove, watching over her beloved forest as she had for countless ages, and would for ages yet to come. Merlin turned toward home, toward his tower of gray stone that shifted color with the light, toward the duties and demands that awaited him. But he carried with him now a profound peace, a deep knowing that even in a changing world, there was still beauty, still magic, still hope. And somewhere in the elderwood, the forest continued its ancient song, a symphony of wind and water, leaf and branch, creature and tree. The song of life itself, renewed and restored, singing its eternal melody to anyone who had ears to hear and a heart open enough to listen. The sleeping forest had awakened, and the world was brighter for it. Merlin and the Whispering Caves. The autumn wind swept across the highlands, carrying with it the scent of heather and distant rain. Merlin stood at the window of his tower, his weathered hands resting on the cool stone ledge, watching as clouds gathered over the western hills. The sky was painted in shades of gray and silver, with occasional breaks where sunlight streamed through in golden shafts, illuminating patches of moorland below. It had been 3 weeks since his journey to the Elderwood Forest, since he had helped the lady weave her enchantment of deep sleep. The memory of those 3 days lingered with him like the aftertaste of fine wine, sweet, profound, transformative. He found himself thinking often of the peace he had felt there, the sense of connection to something larger than himself. But tonight, something else called to him. It had started 2 days ago, a sound so faint he had almost dismissed it as imagination. A whisper, soft as breath, that seemed to come from far away. At first, he heard it only in the deep hours of night, when the world was at its quietest. But gradually, it had grown more persistent, weaving itself into his waking thoughts, a gentle insistence that would not be ignored. The whisper spoke no words, yet somehow Merlin understood its message. It was a call, an invitation, a summons from something ancient that wished to be found. And so, as the afternoon light began to fade and the first drops of rain pattered against his tower windows, Merlin made his preparations. He gathered his staff of ashwood, wrapped himself in his midnight blue cloak, woven with threads of starlight, and filled a leather pouch with a few necessities dried fruit, a piece of bread and cheese, a flask of water drawn from the sacred spring near his tower. The whisper grew stronger as he descended the spiral stairs, as if pleased that he was finally answering its call. It seemed to pull him northward, toward the wild lands where few people ventured, where the moorlands gave way to rocky hills, and those hills climbed toward mountains whose peaks were often lost in cloud. Merlin stepped out into the gathering dusk. The rain had become a fine mist that hung in the air, soft against his face, beating on his cloak like scattered diamonds. The world was gray and quiet, wrapped in that particular stillness that comes just before true darkness falls. In the distance, he could hear the lonely cry of a curlew, its voice echoing across the empty spaces. He walked steadily northward, his staff tapping a gentle rhythm against the earth. The path he followed was barely visible, more a suggestion than a true trail, winding between clumps of gorse and heather. The purple flowers of the heather were fading now with autumn's approach, but they still held their color, and the air was rich with their honey-sweet scent, intensified by the moisture. As Merlin walked, the mist thickened around him, creating a cocoon of soft grayness that muffled sound and obscured distance. He could see perhaps 20 paces ahead, no more. The world beyond that circle of visibility became mysterious, full of shadows and suggestions. But the wizard was not troubled. He had walked in far darker places than this, and the whisper that called to him was gentle, not threatening. The moorland began to rise, the ground growing rockier beneath his feet. Outcroppings of gray stone emerged from the earth, like the bones of the world showing through its skin. Sheep grazed here and there, their wool damp and matted, their eyes calm as they watched him pass. One old Away with a black face bleated softly, as if in greeting, and Merlin paused to rest his hand briefly on her woolly head before continuing on. The rain increased slightly, no longer a mist but actual droplets, though still gentle. It made a soft pattering sound against Merlin's cloak, against the rocks, against the tough leaves of the gorse. Water began to trickle in small rivulets between the stones, finding ancient pathways carved by countless seasons of rain. The sound of running water joined the whisper in Merlin's ears, creating a layered symphony of gentle sounds. Higher he climbed, following the pull of the whisper northward and upward. The sheep disappeared, left behind in their lower pastures. The vegetation grew sparser, less heather now, more exposed rock and hardy grasses that bent before the wind. The air grew cooler, and Merlin was grateful for his warm cloak. As true darkness fell, the stars began to emerge between the clouds. They appeared one by one, like candles being lit in a vast hall, until the breaks in the cloud cover revealed swaths of brilliant light. The moon, 3/4 full, rose in the east, its light turning the mist silver and painting everything in shades of gray and white and shadow. By this ethereal light, Merlin continued his climb. His breath came harder now, white puffs in the cooling air, and his legs reminded him that despite his magic, he still inhabited a body that felt the effects of exertion. But he was not tired in an unpleasant way. Rather, it was the good tiredness that comes from purposeful movement, from muscles used as they were meant to be used. The whisper grew stronger with each step upward, and now Merlin could detect nuances in it that he had not perceived before. It was not a single voice, but many, layered one upon another like harmonies in a complex song. Some whispers were high and clear, as the voices of children. Others were deep and resonant, as the voices of ancient grandfathers. They wove together in patterns that shifted and changed, creating meanings without words. The landscape changed as Merlin climbed higher. The rolling moorland gave way to a region of tumbled boulders and rocky slopes, a place where the bones of the earth were fully exposed. Great slabs of stone lay at odd angles, as if giants had been playing with building blocks and abandoned their game. Between these massive rocks, narrow passages wound like corridors, sometimes so tight that Merlin had to turn sideways to pass through. Water was everywhere, now not just rain, but springs that bubbled up from between the rocks, creating little pools and streams that tumbled down the slopes in miniature waterfalls. The sound of water became constant, a backdrop to the mysterious whispers. Merlin paused beside one clear pool to drink, cupping his hands and bringing the cold, sweet water to his lips. It tasted of stone and sky and the deep places of the earth. As he straightened from drinking, Merlin saw a darker shadow among the shadows, an opening in the rock face ahead. The whispers suddenly intensified, swelling like an orchestra reaching a crescendo, then softening again to their previous gentle murmur. But there was a quality of welcome in them now, of anticipation. He had found the entrance to the Whispering Caves. The opening was not large, perhaps twice Merlin's height, and wide enough for 3 men to walk abreast. But even from where he stood, the wizard could feel the age of it, the sense of deep time that emanated from the darkness within. This was no ordinary cave, no simple hollow in the rock. This was a place of power, a threshold between the surface world and the hidden realms below. Merlin approached slowly, with respect. The rain had stopped, and the mist was beginning to lift, revealing more stars overhead. The moon's light illuminated the entrance, showing smooth stone worn by countless years of wind and water. Strange patterns were carved into the rock face around the opening spirals and circles, lines and curves that seemed to shift in the uncertain light, never quite holding their shape. At the threshold, Merlin paused. The whispers poured from the cave mouth like invisible water, washing over him, through him. They were welcoming, yes, but they also carried a question. Are you ready? Are you prepared for what lies within? The wizard smiled slightly and raised his staff. The wood began to glow with a soft, steady light, not bright enough to banish the beautiful darkness entirely, but sufficient to illuminate his path. The starlight threads in his cloak began to shine as well, creating a gentle nimbus around him. I am ready, Merlin said quietly, speaking to the whispers, to the cave, to whatever ancient presence dwelt within. I have come because you called, and I am listening. And with those words, he stepped across the threshold and into the whispering caves. The darkness within was not absolute. As Merlin's eyes adjusted, he began to perceive a faint luminescence that seemed to come from the walls themselves. A soft, pale glow like foxfire, or the light of certain mushrooms that grow in deep forests. It was just enough to reveal the shape of the passage ahead, winding deeper into the hillside. The cave was larger inside than the entrance had suggested. The ceiling rose high above, disappearing into shadows that Merlin's staff light could not quite penetrate. The walls were smooth, carved by ancient underground rivers that had long since found new paths or dried up entirely. Here and there, formations of stone hung from above or rose from below stalactites and stalagmites, some thin as fingers, others massive as tree trunks, all glistening with moisture. But it was the whispers that dominated the space. Inside the cave, they were everywhere, echoing and re-echoing off the stone walls, creating layers upon layers of sound. They came from ahead and behind, from above and below, from passages Merlin had not yet explored. The acoustics of the cave transformed them, gave them depth and resonance, turned them into a choir of voices that filled the space with their soft, insistent song. Merlin walked deeper into the caves, his staff light casting moving shadows on the walls. Water dripped from the ceiling in places, creating a gentle percussion plink, plink, plink that added rhythm to the whispers. Small pools lay scattered across the cave floor, their surfaces perfectly still, reflecting the faint glow of the walls, and Merlin's light like dark mirrors. The passage he followed curved and turned, sometimes widening into chambers as large as the great hall of a castle, sometimes narrowing to corridors barely wide enough for him to pass. And everywhere, carved into the walls, were more of those strange patterns he had seen at the entrance spirals that seemed to draw the eye inward, circles within circles, lines that connected in ways that suggested meanings just beyond comprehension. As Merlin progressed deeper into the earth, the temperature changed. The cool dampness of the outer cave gave way to a more constant, moderate warmth, as if he were descending into the earth's gentle embrace. The air itself seemed different, cleaner somehow, despite being underground, as if it were being purified by its passage through the stone. He came to a place where the passage divided, branching into 3 separate corridors. Merlin paused, considering. The whispers came equally from all 3 passages, offering no obvious guidance. But as he stood there, breathing slowly, centering himself, he became aware of something beneath the whispers, a deeper sound, more felt than heard, like the very heartbeat of the earth. It came from the middle passage. Merlin smiled and chose that path, trusting his intuition as he had learned to do over his long life. The corridor led downward at a gentle angle, and the walls here were covered in more intricate carvings than he had seen before. These were not just abstract patterns, but images, scenes of ancient times, of people and creatures, of ceremonies and celebrations, all rendered in flowing lines that seemed to move in his staff light. The passage descended deeper into the heart of the hill, and with each step, Merlin felt the weight of the earth above him, not oppressive, but comforting, like a heavy blanket on a cold night. The whispers grew richer here, more complex, as if he were approaching their source. They seemed to speak of memory, of things long past, of wisdom accumulated over ages beyond counting. The corridor opened suddenly into a vast chamber that took Merlin's breath away. His staff light, small as it was, revealed a space so enormous that the far walls were lost in darkness. But it was not the size that amazed him, it was the beauty. The entire chamber was filled with formations of stone that defied imagination. Columns rose from floor to ceiling, created over millennia by the patient dripping of mineral-laden water, drop by drop, year by year, century by century. Some were slender as saplings, others massive as ancient oaks. They glowed with that same soft, internal light, but here it was stronger. More varied shades of pale blue and green, soft gold and silver, creating an illumination that was both earthly and otherworldly. Curtains of stone hung from the ceiling, thin enough in places to see light through them, rippling and folded like fabric frozen mid-motion. Terraces of flowstone cascaded down the walls in frozen waterfalls of white and cream and pale orange. And everywhere, water dripped not randomly, but in patterns and rhythms, creating a music that was both percussion and melody, both simple and infinitely complex. But most remarkable of all was the pool at the chamber's center. It was perfectly circular, perhaps 50 paces across, its water so clear and still that it seemed more like polished glass than liquid. The surface reflected the glowing formations above with such perfect clarity that it was impossible to tell where the real chamber ended and its reflection began. The whispers seemed to emanate from this pool, rising from its depths like bubbles, spreading outward to fill the entire cave system. Merlin approached the pool slowly, reverently. As he drew near, he noticed that the edge was lined with smooth stones, each one carved with symbols and patterns. Some he recognized from his long studies ancient runes of power, marks of protection, signs that spoke of threshold and passage. Others were completely unknown to him, perhaps older than any writing he had encountered, perhaps from civilizations that had risen and fallen before human memory began. He knelt at the pool's edge, setting his staff aside where it could continue to provide its gentle light. The water was so clear he could see straight to the bottom, which was covered in smooth pebbles that glowed with their own soft radiance, white and blue and green, like stars fallen to earth and transformed by their long rest in darkness. "You have come far, Merlin," a voice said. The wizard was not startled. He had sensed, as he approached the pool, that something dwelt here, not a creature in the ordinary sense, but a presence, an awareness. The voice that spoke seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, woven into the whispers themselves. "I have," Merlin replied softly, his words echoing gently in the vast space. "Though I confess I do not fully understand why I was called. Do you not?" The voice was neither male nor female, neither young nor old. It was like the voice of the stone itself, patient and enduring. "Look into the water, wizard. Look and see." Merlin leaned forward and gazed into the pool's perfect surface. At first, he saw only his own reflection, an old man with a lined face and gray beard, eyes that had witnessed more than most. But as he continued to watch, the reflection began to change. Images formed in the water, clear as if he were looking through a window rather than at a reflection. He saw himself as a young man, eager and full of fire, learning his first spells from teachers whose names had been lost to time. He saw his years of study, of practice, of slowly accumulating knowledge and power. He saw his triumphs and his failures, his moments of wisdom and his mistakes. He saw young Arthur, barely more than a boy, pulling the sword from the stone while crowds watched in wonder. He saw the building of Camelot, the gathering of the knights, the brief, shining moment when it seemed that humanity might truly create something noble and lasting. And he saw the fall, the betrayals, the battles, the slow dissolution of that bright dream. He saw the people he had helped over his long years, and those he had failed to help. He saw the magic he had worked, the spells cast, the enchantments woven. He saw his tower standing solitary on the hilltop, a refuge and a prison both. And he saw his loneliness. It rose before him in the water, like a physical thing, the isolation that came from outliving everyone he had ever cared for, from watching the world change, while he remained largely unchanged, from bearing knowledge and power that set him apart from ordinary humanity. He had grown skilled at ignoring this loneliness, at filling his days with study and work, and the constant demands placed upon him by those who sought his counsel. But it was there, nonetheless, a constant ache in the depths of his being. Tears slipped down Merlin's weathered cheeks as he watched these visions unfold. The water showed him truth without judgment, without commentary, simply presenting what had been, what he had become. "You carry great burdens," the voice said gently, as the visions finally faded and the water returned to its clear, reflective calm. "You have given much to the world, Merlin. You have used your gifts to help and to heal, to guide and to protect. But you have forgotten to care for yourself." Merlin wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, not ashamed of his tears. "I do what I must," he said quietly. "The world needs. The world will endure." The voice interrupted, still gentle but firm. "It endured before you, and it will endure after you. The question is not what the world needs, Merlin. The question is what you need." The wizard was silent for a long moment, listening to the drip and echo of water, to the layered whispers that filled the chamber. What did he need? It had been so long since he had asked himself that question. His life had become about serving others, about using his power for the greater good, about carrying responsibilities that seemed to grow heavier with each passing year. "I am tired," he admitted finally, the words coming from some deep, honest place within him. "Not just my body, though that grows weary, but my spirit, my soul. I am tired of watching beauty fade, of seeing dreams crumble, of carrying so much and being unable to share the weight." "Yes," the voice said, and there was profound compassion in it. "And that is why the caves called to you. This is a place of rest, Merlin. Not rest for the body alone, but rest for the spirit. A place where burdens can be set down, where the constant flow of time pauses, where healing can occur at the deepest levels. As the voice spoke, the water in the pool began to glow more brightly. The light that emanated from it was soft and warm, the color of summer sunlight filtered through green leaves, the color of hope and renewal. The whispers that filled the chamber took on a new quality, not just mysterious and ancient, but comforting, soothing, like a lullaby sung by 1,000 kind voices. The waters of this pool had been gathering for longer than human memory, the voice continued. They have filtered through countless layers of stone, absorbing minerals and essences, becoming purified and charged with the earth's slow power. To bathe in these waters is to be cleansed not just of physical dirt, but of spiritual weariness, of accumulated pain, of the weight of years. Merlin looked at the glowing water, then back at his reflection, now returned to simply showing his aged face, but somehow softer, more peaceful than before. Is this what you offer me? Healing? I offer you respite, the voice replied. A chance to rest deeply, to release what no longer serves you, to remember who you are beneath all the roles you play and the responsibilities you carry. The choice, as always, is yours. The wizard sat back on his heels, considering. Part of him wanted to refuse, to say that he could not spare the time, that there were too many who depended on him, too much that needed to be done. But another part, a quieter, wiser part, recognized this for the gift it was. How long had it been since he had truly rested? Since he had allowed himself to simply be, without agenda or purpose, or the constant weight of others' needs. How long would I remain here? He asked. As long as you need, the voice said. Time moves strangely in these caves, as it does in all places of deep magic. You might spend what feels like days here, and emerge to find only hours have passed. Or you might rest for what seems a brief while, and find that the world above has turned through a full season. The caves will keep you safe and release you when the time is right. Merlin thought of the Elderwood, of the 3 days he had spent there, helping the lady maintain her enchantment of sleep. He thought of how restored the forest had been upon waking, how refreshed and renewed. Could the same be done for him? Could he allow himself such a gift? The answer rose from that deep, honest place within him. Yes, I accept, Merlin said simply. I accept your offer of respite and healing. The whispers swelled in what sounded like approval, like celebration. The light from the pool grew warmer, more inviting. And the voice spoke again, this time with instructions. Remove your cloak and your outer garments. Enter the water as you came into the world unadorned, unburdened. The pool is warm, and you need not fear its depth. It will hold you safely as you float, as you rest, as you release all that weighs upon you. Merlin did as instructed, moving with the deliberate care of age. He removed his starlight cloak and folded it carefully, setting it beside his staff. His outer robe followed, then his tunic and boots, until he stood in simple linen undergarments at the pool's edge. The air of the chamber was warm enough that he did not feel cold, though his skin prickled slightly with awareness. He stepped into the water. It was neither hot nor cold, but precisely body temperature, as if he were stepping not into water, but into liquid warmth itself. The sensation was exquisite, comforting beyond words. As he waded deeper, the glowing pebbles shifted gently beneath his feet, smooth and rounded, providing secure footing. When the water reached his chest, Merlin allowed himself to lean back and float. The pool held him effortlessly, as if the water were somehow denser than ordinary water, more supportive. He closed his eyes and let his arms drift outward, his legs relax, his entire body surrendered to the gentle embrace of the healing waters. The whispers surrounded him, above and below, emanating from the water itself now. They spoke of peace, of release, of letting go. They spoke of the earth's patient love, of the slow work of healing that happened in darkness and silence, of the power of rest to restore and renew. Merlin felt something beginning to happen. The constant tension he carried in his shoulders, in his back, in his neck tension so familiar, he barely noticed it anymore, began to dissolve. The ache in his joints, the stiffness of age, the weariness of years, all of it started to flow out of him like water draining from a vessel, seeping away into the pool. But it was not just physical discomfort that departed. Deeper things were being released as well. The grief he carried for Arthur and Camelot, for all the dreams that had died and the friends he had lost. The frustration of watching the world change in ways he could not control. The loneliness of being set apart by power and knowledge and the weight of years. The constant pressure of feeling responsible for so much, of carrying burdens that were perhaps too heavy for any one person to bear. All of it flowed out of him, drawn gently away by the whispering waters, absorbed by the ancient stone, transformed by the slow alchemy of the earth. Time lost all meaning as Merlin floated in the healing pool. Minutes became hours, became days, or perhaps only seconds. There was no way to know, and no need to know. The whispers continued their gentle song, a constant presence that wrapped around him like a cocoon of sound, soothing and eternal. As the burdens flowed out of him, Merlin began to experience something he had not felt in many years' lightness. Not just physical lightness, though his body felt as if it weighed nothing, suspended effortlessly in the warm waters, but a lightness of spirit, as if invisible chains he had worn for so long, they felt like part of his body were finally falling away, link by link. The glowing water seemed to pulse gently around him, in rhythm with his heartbeat, or perhaps his heartbeat was synchronizing with the pulse of the water. It was impossible to tell which was leading and which was following. All Merlin knew was that he felt held, supported, cared for in a way that transcended ordinary experience. Images began to drift through his mind, but these were different from the visions the pool had shown him earlier. These were not memories of the past, but something else, possibilities, perhaps, or simply the wandering dreams that come when the conscious mind finally releases its grip and allows the deeper self to speak. He saw forests growing, their trees reaching toward the sky in slow motion, seasons passing in breaths. He saw rivers flowing from mountain peaks to distant seas, their courses changing over centuries, carving new paths through stone. He saw stars wheeling overhead, their light traveling through vast spaces to illuminate the earth below. He saw the patient work of small things, seeds sprouting, roots spreading, fungi breaking down fallen trees and returning them to soil. The endless cycle of growth and decay and renewal. And he saw himself, but not as he was. He saw the essence of himself, stripped of all the roles and responsibilities, all the accumulated weight of years and deeds. Just the pure spark of consciousness, the aware presence that had existed before he learned his first spell, before he took on his first burden, before the world shaped him into what he had become. That spark was bright and clear and untarnished, eternal and unchanging despite all the years that had passed. You are more than what you do, the whispers seemed to say. You are more than your power, more than your knowledge, more than the service you provide to others. You are, at your core, simply consciousness experiencing existence. And that is enough. That has always been enough. Tears flowed from Merlin's closed eyes, mixing with the pool water, becoming one with it. But these were different tears than before, not tears of sorrow or regret, but tears of release, of recognition, of profound relief. How long had he defined himself by his usefulness, by what he could do for others? How long had he forgotten the simple truth that his value did not depend on his actions, that he had worth simply by virtue of existing? The water seemed to grow warmer, more luminous. Merlin felt as if he were dissolving into it, becoming one with the ancient pool, with the stone that surrounded it, with the earth itself. His boundaries, where Merlin ended and the world began, became unclear, porous, eventually non-existent. He was the water and the stone and the whispers and the darkness and the light all at once. And in that state of unity, he understood something fundamental about the nature of rest. True rest was not simply the absence of activity. It was not just lying down or closing one's eyes or pausing from labor. True rest was a return to the source, a dissolution of the separate self back into the wholeness from which it had emerged. It was remembering that beneath all the distinctions and divisions, all the individual identities and separate forms, there was only one thing. Call it the earth, call it consciousness, call it the divine, call it whatever name felt true, and everything was an expression of that one thing, temporarily taking form, playing its role, then returning home. Merlin had forgotten this truth in the press of daily life, in the urgency of tasks and responsibilities. He had come to believe that he was isolated, alone, carrying burdens that were his alone to bear. But that was an illusion. He had never been separate, never been alone. He was part of the great web of existence, connected to everything, supported by everything, held always in the embrace of something infinitely larger than his individual self. The realization brought such peace that Merlin felt he might weep forever, not from sorrow, but from gratitude, from wonder, from the sheer relief of finally remembering what he had forgotten. How long he floated in this state of unity and understanding, he could not say. But gradually, gently, he became aware of returning to himself. The boundaries of his body solidified again. The distinction between Merlin and the water between self and other, reasserted itself, and now it felt less like a prison and more like a costume one puts on to play a role, knowing it can be removed again when the performance is done. He opened his eyes. The chamber looked the same, the glowing formations, the whisper-filled air, the luminous pool. But Merlin saw it differently now, with eyes refreshed and renewed. Every surface seemed more vivid, more alive. The play of light and shadow was infinitely complex and beautiful. The sound of dripping water was not just sound but music, each drop a perfect note in an endless composition. And he felt different. The bone-deep weariness that had become such a constant companion, he barely noticed it anymore. It was gone. The tension, the burden, the weight of accumulated years, all released, dissolved, transformed. His body felt light and strong, his joints flexible, his muscles relaxed yet vital. But more than physical renewal, he felt a profound peace in his spirit, a clarity in his mind, a spaciousness in his heart. "You have rested well," the voice said, seeming to come from the water itself, from the stone, from the whispers that filled the chamber. "You have released what no longer serves you and remembered what you had forgotten." Merlin smiled, and it was a genuine smile, one that reached his eyes and crinkled the corners in the way that only true joy can produce. "I have," he said simply. "Thank you. This gift is beyond measure." "It is the earth's gift," the voice replied, "given freely to all who come to these caves with open hearts and genuine need. The waters will always be here, always waiting, always ready to receive those who are weary and heavy laden." The wizard floated for a few moments longer, savoring the sensation, imprinting it in his memory so he could carry it with him when he left. Then, slowly, he stood in the pool, water streaming from his body. He waded to the edge and climbed out, feeling the cool air of the chamber against his wet skin. His clothes lay where he had left them, and he dressed slowly, mindfully, aware of each movement, each sensation. The linen felt soft against his skin. His robe settled comfortably on his shoulders. His cloak, when he wrapped it around himself, seemed to shine more brightly than before, its threads of starlight pulsing with gentle radiance. And his staff, when he took it up again, felt perfectly balanced in his hand, an extension of his will rather than a separate object. "Will you stay longer?" the voice asked. "The caves have many chambers, many wonders. You are welcome to explore, to rest more if you wish." Merlin considered, then shook his head gently. "I am grateful, but I think it is time for me to return. The world above continues its turning, and while I now understand that I am not solely responsible for it, I still have a role to play. But I will carry this experience with me, and I will return when I need to remember these truths again." "Then go with blessing," the voice said. "Walk gently in the world, Merlin. Remember that rest is not weakness, but wisdom. Remember that you are held always in the earth's embrace, never alone, never separate. And remember that these caves will always welcome you home." The whispers swelled in what could only be described as a farewell song, a benediction woven of sound and stone and water. Merlin bowed deeply toward the pool, honoring the presence that dwelt there, thanking the ancient waters for their gift. Then he turned and began to make his way back through the passages, following his memory and his intuition, guided by the soft glow of the cave walls and the light of his staff. The journey back seemed both shorter and longer than his descent had been. Shorter because he moved with renewed energy, his steps light and sure. Longer because he noticed so much more: the intricate patterns in the stone, the delicate formations that hung like frozen waterfalls, the way sound echoed and transformed in different chambers, creating natural acoustics that would make any musician weep with envy. He passed through the chamber where the passage had divided into three, continuing straight on the path that would lead him back to the surface. He moved through narrower corridors and wider halls, always ascending, always following the subtle pull that led toward the outer world. And as he walked, Merlin found himself reflecting on his experience. The healing he had received was profound, transformative, but he understood now that it was not a permanent fix, not a spell that would keep him forever free of weariness and burden. Life would continue to accumulate its weights and demands. The world would continue to change in ways that challenged him. He would continue to carry responsibilities and face difficulties. But now he knew deeply, viscerally knew, that rest was available, that he could return to the source, dissolve his boundaries, remember his connection to all things. Whether here in these caves or in other sacred places, or simply by closing his eyes and turning his awareness inward, to touch that place of peace that existed always at his core, rest was possible. Renewal was possible. He was not trapped in his weariness, not condemned to carry his burdens until they crushed him. This knowledge was itself a kind of magic, more powerful perhaps than any spell he had ever learned. The air grew cooler as Merlin approached the surface, and he could feel the subtle shift in atmosphere. That marked the boundary between the deep caves and the outer world. The glow of the stone walls grew fainter, replaced gradually by a different kind of light gray and soft, the light of early dawn filtering in from the entrance ahead. Merlin paused just inside the cave mouth, looking out at the world he had left behind. He could not say with certainty how long he had been underground. Time had moved so strangely in the pool chamber, stretching and contracting, becoming meaningless. But the quality of light suggested that night had passed and morning was breaking over the highlands. He stepped out into the cool dawn air and took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the scent of heather and stone, of moisture and growing things. The mist had cleared during the night, and the sky above was a pale, luminous gray, touched with pink and gold at the eastern horizon, where the sun was preparing to rise. Stars were fading in the west, giving way reluctantly to day. The landscape spread before him in shades of purple and gray and green, the rolling hills, the scattered boulders, the tough grasses bending in the morning breeze. A few sheep had ventured up this high, and they grazed peacefully among the rocks, their presence a quiet reminder of the ordinary world, of life continuing its patient cycles. Merlin walked a short distance from the cave entrance and found a flat rock where he could sit and watch the sunrise. His body felt no need for rest. The pool had restored him completely, but he wanted to mark this moment, to be present for the transition from night to day, from the deep introspection of the caves to his return to the waking world. As he sat, the whispers from the cave grew fainter, though they did not disappear entirely. They remained at the edge of his hearing, a gentle reminder that the peace he had found was not something left behind in the depths, but something he carried with him now. The cave had given him a gift, yes, but it had also awakened something within him, a remembering of his own capacity for rest, for renewal, for connection to something larger than himself. The sun broke over the eastern hills, spilling golden light across the landscape. It touched the tops of the mountains first, and flowed down their slopes like liquid honey, illuminating everything it reached. The gray stones turned gold and amber. The heather caught fire with color-deep purple flowers, suddenly vivid against their gray-green stems. The pools of water that dotted the hillside reflected the sky, becoming mirrors of blue and gold. And Merlin sat and watched, simply present, simply aware, allowing the beauty to wash over him without trying to capture it, or analyze it, or do anything with it. Just receiving it as the gift it was. This moment, this light, this breath. A bird began to sing somewhere nearby a skylark, its voice rising in spiraling trills of pure joy. Another answered from a different direction, and then more joined in until the morning was filled with their chorus. Merlin smiled, listening to their song, recognizing in it the same pattern he had heard in the whispers of the cave life celebrating itself. Consciousness expressing its joy at existing, at experiencing another dawn, another day, another opportunity to be. As the sun climbed higher and the golden light spread across the entire landscape, Merlin noticed movement on the path below. A figure was making its way up the hill too far away, yet to identify, but moving with purpose, heading in his direction. The wizard felt no alarm. Whatever or whoever approached, they came in daylight and openness, and the peace that filled him left no room for fear. He waited, watching as the figure drew closer. It was a woman, he could see now, young and strong, with dark hair bound back and a shepherd's staff in her hand. She wore the simple, sturdy clothing of someone who worked the land, and a small dog trotted at her heels, tongue lolling happily. The woman spotted Merlin and raised a hand in greeting, then continued her climb until she stood before him. Her face was weathered by wind and sun, her hands work-roughened, but her eyes were bright and curious, holding no fear at encountering a strange old man in the wild highlands at dawn. "Good morning, grandfather," she said, using the respectful term for any elder. "I saw you from my cottage in the valley. Not many venture this far up the hills, especially not to the caves." She glanced at the dark entrance behind him, and something like reverence crossed her face. "Did you hear them? The whispers?" Merlin rose slowly to his feet, leaning lightly on his staff. "I did," he said with a warm smile. "I followed them into the depths and found what I needed." The woman nodded as if this made perfect sense. "My grandmother told me stories of those caves. She said they were a place of healing, where the earth herself offers comfort to those who are weary." She said the waters there can wash away more than dirt. They can cleanse the soul itself. She studied Merlin with keen eyes. You look like a man who has been renewed. I am, Merlin agreed simply. The caves and the waters gave me a gift beyond price. They reminded me of truths I had forgotten. The shepherd smiled. Then you were meant to find them. The whispers only call to those who truly need what the caves offer. She gestured down the hill with her staff. I was about to break my fast. Would you join me? My cottage is not far, and I have fresh bread and cheese, and tea that will warm you after your night underground. Merlin felt a surge of gratitude for this simple kindness, this uncomplicated human connection. I would be honored, he said. Together they descended the hillside, the shepherd leading the way along paths only she could see, her dog ranging ahead and circling back, tail wagging. The sun continued its climb, warming the air, burning away the last remnants of night's chill. The heather released its honey scent more strongly as the day warmed, and bees were beginning to emerge, drawn to the purple flowers. The cottage, when they reached it, was small and tidy, built of gray stone with a thatched roof. Smoke rose from its chimney, suggesting a fire had been banked overnight and was now being stirred back to life. A small garden grew beside the cottage herbs and vegetables in neat rows, evidence of careful tending. Inside, the cottage was simple but comfortable. A single room served as kitchen, living space, and bedroom. Bundles of dried herbs hung from the rafters, filling the air with their fragrance. A pot hung over the fire, and the shepherd added wood to the flames, then filled it with water from a bucket by the door. Sit, please, she said, gesturing to a rough wooden chair by the fire. I am called Rhiannon. I tend the sheep that graze these hills and live simply, as my grandmother did before me. I am called Merlin, the wizard said, settling into the chair, and I am grateful for your hospitality. If Rhiannon recognized the name, she gave no sign of it. She busied herself preparing their meal-slicing bread that looked freshly baked, cutting cheese, adding herbs to the heating water for tea. Her movements were efficient and graceful, the movements of someone at home in their space, comfortable with their life. As they ate together, breaking bread in the simple communion of shared food, Rhiannon spoke of her life, the rhythm of the seasons, the needs of the flock, the solitude and peace of living in the wild places. She spoke of watching weather patterns, of knowing which plants would heal and which would harm, of the satisfaction that came from hard work and simple pleasures. Merlin listened more than he spoke, content to receive her words, to witness her contentment. Here was someone who had found peace not through magic or mystical experiences, but through connection to the land, through useful work, through accepting the life she had been given and finding beauty in it. You seem troubled by something, Rhiannon said eventually, her perceptive eyes studying him. Or perhaps you were troubled, and now are less so? Merlin smiled. The latter, he said. I had forgotten how to rest, how to let go of burdens I carried. The caves reminded me. And now, sitting here with you, sharing this simple meal, this reminds me as well. That peace is not something exotic or far away. It is here, in simple things, in human kindness, in bread and cheese and morning light. Rhiannon nodded, understanding in her expression. My grandmother used to say that we make life complicated when it wants to be simple. She said the earth knows how to rest. It rests in winter, gathers strength, and blooms again in spring. And we are of the earth, made from it, sustained by it. Why should we not follow its wisdom? Why, indeed, Merlin murmured, feeling the truth of her words settle into him alongside the healing he had received in the caves. They finished their meal in comfortable silence, sipping the herbal tea, listening to the crackle of the fire and the wind moving past the cottage walls. The dog lay at Rhiannon's feet, content and drowsy. Through the small window, Merlin could see the hills rising toward the mountains, could see the cave entrance, just visible as a dark smudge against the gray stone. Eventually, Merlin rose to take his leave. Thank you, he said to Rhiannon, for the food, for the company, for the wisdom. You have added to the gift the caves gave me. Rhiannon stood as well and walked him to the door. Travel safely, Merlin. And remember the caves are always there, but so is this. She gestured to the landscape around them, to the morning light and the rolling hills, to the simple beauty of the ordinary world. Rest is everywhere, if we remember to look for it. Merlin bowed to her, a gesture of respect and gratitude, then set off down the path that would lead him home to his tower. The sun was fully risen now, the day bright and clear. He walked without hurry, his staff tapping a gentle rhythm against the earth, his cloak billowing slightly in the breeze. As he walked, he noticed everything with fresh eyes. The way light moved across the landscape as clouds passed overhead. The intricate patterns and spider webs stretched between grass stems, jeweled with morning dew. The calls of birds going about their business. The feel of the earth beneath his feet, solid and supportive. The taste of the air, clean and fresh. He thought about the caves and their whispers, about the healing pool and its ancient waters. He thought about Rhiannon and her simple wisdom, and he thought about himself, about the wizard he had been when he climbed into these hills the night before, weary and burdened, and the wizard he was now, restored and renewed. The change was not traumatic in any external way. He had not gained new powers or learned new spells. His responsibilities had not disappeared, nor had the world's problems been solved. But internally, everything was different. He had been reminded of something essential, that he was more than his duties, more than his magic, more than the role he played in the world's unfolding drama. He was simply consciousness experiencing existence, part of the great web of being that connected all things. And that was enough. That had always been enough. By late afternoon, Merlin's tower came into view across the moorlands. It stood as it always had, gray stone shifting colors in the light, solitary but not lonely. He approached it with affection, seeing it now as a place of refuge rather than isolation, a space where he could study and work, but also rest, a home rather than just a dwelling. As he climbed the stairs to his study, he noticed that dust had gathered on his books and papers. Correspondence waited, as he had known it would. Tasks and responsibilities beckoned, but they no longer felt overwhelming. They were simply what they were, work to be done. Yes, but not the entirety of his existence. Merlin moved to his window and looked out across the landscape toward the northern hills where the caves lay hidden. He could no longer see them from this distance, but he knew they were there, waiting patiently, as they had waited for millennia, ready to offer their gift of rest and renewal to all who heard the whispers and had the courage to follow them into the depths. "Thank you," he said softly, speaking to the caves, to the earth, to the mysterious presence that dwelt in the pool's depths. "I will not forget what you have taught me, and I will return when I need to remember again." A breeze stirred through his window, carrying the scent of heather and distance, and in it, Merlin thought he heard, just for a moment, the faint echo of whispers, like a response, like a blessing, like a promise that he was heard and held and never alone. He smiled and turned back to his study, ready now to engage with the world again, but carrying within him the deep peace of the caves, the simple wisdom of Rhiannon, and the profound understanding that rest was not a luxury, but a necessity, not a weakness, but a strength, not an escape from life, but a way of honoring it. And so the day passed into evening, and evening into night, and Merlin lived his life with renewed purpose and deeper peace, knowing that whenever he grew weary again, whenever the burdens became too heavy, the caves would be waiting, whispering their ancient song of rest and renewal, offering the earth's eternal gift of healing to all who came with open hearts. The stars emerged one by one in the darkening sky. The moon rose, casting its silver light across the moorlands. And in his tower, Merlin settled into his chair, opened a book, and read by candlelight, content in the simple pleasure of the moment, grateful for the gift of another day, another breath, another opportunity to experience the wonder of existence. Peace settled over the land like a gentle blanket. The world turned on its axis, continuing its eternal dance through space. And in the northern hills, deep beneath the earth, the whispering caves continued their patient vigil, their waters flowing, their whispers singing, waiting for the next weary soul who would hear their call and find their way home to rest. And so Merlin's journey to the whispering caves came to an end. But the peace he found there, the deep rest, the healing waters, the remembering of who he truly was, that peace traveled with him, woven into his very being. The caves remain, as they always have, as they always will. Their waters flow eternal. Their whispers echo through stone corridors, calling to those who need rest, offering sanctuary to weary souls. Perhaps one day, you too will hear their call. Perhaps you too will follow the sound of distant water and find yourself standing at the threshold of those ancient caves, ready to receive the gift of deep rest and renewal. But for now, simply rest where you are. Our tale is complete. Merlin has found his peace, and now it's time for you to find yours. Close your eyes and breathe slowly. Feel yourself sinking into rest, just as Merlin sank into those healing waters. All is well. All is safe. All is peaceful. The whispering caves sing their lullaby for you tonight. Listen, can you hear them? Soft whispers, ancient and kind, calling you home to rest. Sleep deeply now. Dream sweetly. Wake refreshed. Good night, dear listener.